Hi, welcome to the LEXCLIQ.com, and I am Mansi Asija and working with the LEXIS and Company. And my today's topic is Introduction of Transfer of Property Act. Transfer of Property Act was enacted to amend the law relating to the transfer of property by an act of parties. The Transfer of Property Act came into existence in 1882. Before that, the transfer of immovable property was governed by principles in English law and guilty equity. The preamble of Act sets out the objectives of the legislation. The purpose of this act is to define and certain parts of the law of transfer of property. Scope of this act is limited. It applies only to transfer by the act of parties, not by operation of law. Also, this act deals with the transfer of property, that is, a transfer between living persons. जो ये एक्ट है वो डील करता है किस चीज के लिए करता है कि जब कोई भी दो पर्सन दे आर लिविंग इन अ हाउस to transfer their property. Like for example, let's take an example. I want to transfer my property to my son. Then this act will be applied. In this case, it contains the transfer of both movable and immovable property. In Transfer of Property Act, both movable and immovable property is deal, but a major portion of the enactment is applicable to the transfer of immovable properties only. The act is not exhaustive. Always remember. Let's move to the main introduction. Regulation of transfer of act by parties. Before the Transfer of Property Act came into existence in 1882, the transfer of immovable properties in India were governed by the principles of English law and equity. In the absence of any statutory provisions, the court have to fall back upon English law on real properties, sometimes forcing the courts to decide the disputes according to their own notions of justice and fair play, resulting in confused and conflicting case laws. To remedy these confusions and conflicts, a law commission was appointed in England to prepare a code of substantive law of transfer of properties in India. Sometimes questions arise in the exams or any in other exams. Define Transfer of Property Act, how it was enacted. So this all the information will be written in this question. This commission prepared to draft bill which was sent to the Secretary of State for India. The bill was introduced in the Legislative Council in 1877. The bill was then referred to a select committee and it was also sent to the local governments for their comments. The bill was discussed and redrafted on many points and referred to a third law commission. What is third law commission? What what it consisted? The third law commission consisted of Sir Charles Turner, Chief Justice of Madras, Sir Raymond Wast, and Mr. Whiteley Stokes, law member of the Council of the Governor General. Okay. The bill pertaining to Transfer of Property Act 1882 was prepared not less than 7 times before the final bill was passed, and it came into force with effect from 17th February 1882 as Transfer of Property Act 1882. Now, objection scope of Transfer of Property Act. The Act defines and amends a law relating to the transfer of property by act of parties. The Act does not cover transfer of property by operation of law. Further, transfer of property by act of parties again may be testamentary. Transfer means what does transfer means? Transfer between two living persons, whereas testamentary transfers to transfer by will, etc. The Transfer of Property Act 1882 covers only inter vivos transfers. Testamentary transfers are governed by the Indian Succession Act 1925. The objects and scope of the Transfer of Property Act. First, this act applies only to transfer by a living person. It does not regulate transfers by operation by law. In case of transfer by living person, both the transfer and transferee are living at the time of transfer. In case of transfer by operation of law, the property is transferred even though the transferor is not alive on the date of the transfer. In this mode of transfer of the property, is transferred automatically by the process of law. For example, devolution of the property upon the legal heirs or legatees by inheritance or under basis by operation of law. Transfer by orders of a court or transmission of property in cases of insolvency, sale, or forfeiture in the execution of court's decree is all by operation of law. Now, second, the Act mainly deal with the transfer of immovable properties, although Section 5 to 37 of Chapter 2 contains provisions which are applicable to both kinds of properties, whether immovable or movable. Mainly, the Act deals only with the transfer of immovable properties. Transfer of movable property are regulated by the Sales of Goods Act 1930. Always remember this thing. Third, the Act has not only defined the existing rules of transfer, but also amended and modified some of them so as to make them suitable to the socio-economic conditions of India. Chapter 2 of the Act, which contains general principles of transfer, does not affect the transfer of Muslims, even if it is against the any provisions of this chapter 2. This means that if there is any provisions in the Transfer of Property Act 1882 which is against the rule of Muslim law, the rule of Muslim law will prevail over the conflicting provisions of this act. The gifts made by Muslims are governed by the Muslim law of Hiba. Section 129 of Chapter 7 says that provisions of this chapter relating to gifts would not be applicable to gifts made by Muslims. However, such exemptions are given only in respect of those rules of Muslim law which are in conflict with any of the provisions of the Act relating dealing with the transfers in general. Now, uh, the Transfer of Property Act 18 was not made applicable to the whole of India in the first instance, as originally enacted. The Act did not enact and the act did not extend to the then state of Bombay, Punjab, and Delhi. There are some important definitions in the Transfer of Property Act: immovable property, land, benefits arising out of land, things attached to the mortgage debt, instrument attested, registered, actionable claims, notice. These are all the important definition under Transfer of Property Act, and it is mentioned in the Bear Act. Thank you for watching this video, and please if you didn't subscribe this channel, just subscribe this channel at the right of your corner. And thank you so much.